Value 3 bets that print. In online poker games, your win rate does not come from making more fancy plays. It comes from consistently putting money in with an equity edge while denying your opponent the chance to realize theirs. Value 3. Betting is one of the cleanest ways to do that pre-flop. If you are 3-betting because you have a good hand, you are thinking in the right direction, but you are still too vague. The real question is simple. When you 3-bet, will worse hands continue often enough? And will your hand play well at a bigger stack-to-pot ratio when called? What value really means in a 3-bet. A 3-bet is for value when calling, or 4-bet ranges contain enough worse hands that you gain expected value by building the pot now. Your hand is not just strong, it is strong relative to the continue range. Here's the mental model I want you using when multi-tabling online. Assign villain an opening range, then ask 2 questions. First, continue test. What hands does villain call or 4-bet versus a 3-bet from your position? Second, domination test. When they continue, how often are you dominating their continuing hands and how often are you crushed? If the continue range is tight and mostly better hands, your value hand can quietly become a thin squeeze of expected value. Context dictates strategy. The biggest driver, position and who is left to act. Most players know position matters. Fewer players actually build their 3-bet value range around it. In position, you can value 3-bet thinner because you realize equity better post-flop. Out of position, you need a more robust edge because you will be forced into more check call and check fold lines and your equity realization drops. Now add the piece most people ignore, who is left to act. If you're on the button facing a cutoff open, the blinds still have decisions. If the big blind is a competent regular who likes cold 4-betting, you're thin value. 3-bets become more volatile. If the blinds are passive callers, you can comfortably pump the pot with hands that dominate their continue ranges. Range interaction, what you want villain to do. Your value to 3-bet wants one of 2 outcomes. First, get called by worse. The sweet spot. You build a pot with an equity edge and keep dominated hands in. Second, get 4-bet by better but not too often. You accept that some portion of their range is strong, but their range also has enough calls that your 3-bet remains profitable. If villain's realistic response is fold most hands, 4-bet only premium, then you are not value 3-betting thin. You are either bluff 3-betting, or you are torching expected value with hands that wanted a call. Default value. 3 bets, by position, then adjust. We are talking 100 big blinds plus, typical online cash. Rake matters, especially in single-raised pots and small pots, but it is not your whole strategy. It just pushes you toward building bigger pots with real edges and avoiding marginal calls that get taxed. These are clean defaults that work well as a baseline. First, versus early position opens. Value tends to start around pocket queens and better an ace-king. Depending on pool tendencies, pocket jacks and ace-queen suited can be value in position, but be honest about the continue range. Second, versus middle position and cutoff. Pocket jacks and better and ace-king are solid. Add ace-queen suited and sometimes pocket tens as value if they call enough with ace-jack, king-queen, and pairs. Third, versus button opens, the widest value region, especially from the blinds. Hands like ace-jack, offsuit, king-queen suited, and pocket tens become value more often because button continues wider and their range is capped more frequently. Then adjust aggressively. Relative strength is everything. Exploitative triggers when to value. 3-bet thinner. In most online pools, you will see the same common leaks. When you spot them, you should shift from theory correct to expected value maximal. First, villain overcalls 3 bets. If they hate folding hands like king-queen offsuit, ace-jack offsuit, suited broadways, and medium pairs, your value range expands. You can 3-bet. Hands like ace-jack suited, king-queen suited, and sometimes ace-queen offsuit for value, especially in position. Second, villain does not 4-bet enough. When 4-bets are underbluffed, you get to 3-bet more hands for value because you are not punished by aggressive 4-bet ranges. Third, villain stacks off too light post-flop. Think of players who cannot fold top pair. 3-betting hands that make strong 1-pair hands like ace-king and ace-queen becomes even more profitable. Fourth, rake sensitive spots. If you're in a high rake environment, calling to see a flop with hands like ace-jack offsuit or king-queen offsuit versus an open is often a leak, turning those into a value. 3-bet versus a wide opener can be higher expected value. Do not confuse this with hope poker. If your plan is 3-bet and maybe hit, you are already off track. Anti-hope. Poker. Why flatting is not automatically safer. A lot of players avoid 3-betting because they fear playing a big pot. That mindset bleeds expected value online because you end up in raked, multi-way, low-clarity situations. 2 common leaks. First, set mining when you should be 3-betting. Small pairs can be fine calls in some deep, soft lineups. In tougher pools, calling a raise to try to flop a set is often too passive, especially when squeezing is common and implied odds are not clean. Second, flatting dominated broadways. Hands like king-queen offsuit, king-jack offsuit, and ace-jack offsuit get you into reverse implied odds trouble. If they are strong enough to continue, they are often strong enough to be played as a 3-bet in the right matchup. The point is not 3-bet everything. The point is that a disciplined value 3-bet strategy avoids the worst version of poker, which is paying rake to play dominated hands in bloated multi-way pots. Sizing. Build a pot that your value hands like. In online poker, population reacts strongly to sizing. Use sizes that create clear incentives. First, in position. Around 2.2x to 2.7x the open is a solid baseline. You want calls from worse, and you do not need to inflate the pot as much because you will realize equity well. Second, out of position. Around 3.3x to 4x is common. You are compensating for positional disadvantage and denying equity to hands that would love to peel in position. If stacks are deeper, lean slightly larger out of position to reduce opponents' positional leverage. If the opener is a calling station, do not be afraid to size up. You are not trying to be nice, you are trying to get paid. Hand scenario, the thin value trap. Game, online. 6 max cash, 100 big blinds effective. Hero is in the small blind. Hero, king of spades, jack of hearts. Villain, a thinking regular on the button, who opens wide and calls 3 bets too much. Pre-flop action, button opens to 2.5 big blinds. Hero 3, bets to 10 big blinds. Big blind folds. Button calls. Flop, jack of clubs, 7 of diamonds, 2 of spades. Flop action. Hero bets 6.5 big blinds into 20.5 big blinds. Button calls. What this shows, this is a classic spot where king-jack becomes a legitimate value, 3-bet versus a wide button, who continues with worse. Jack X, pocket pairs like pocket 8s to pocket 10s, and broadways like queen-jack and jack-10. On this flop, your hand is ahead of a meaningful chunk of his calling range, and you also deny equity to hands like queen of hearts, 10 of hearts that would love a free turn. If this button instead 4-bet aggressively and called tightly, the exact same 3-bet would degrade fast. Quick checklist. Is this a value 3-bet? Before you click it, run this checklist. It takes 2 seconds with practice. First, am I getting action from worse often enough, either calls or dominated? 4-bet continues. Second, does my hand realize equity well, given position and post-flop playability? Third, is there a squeeze or cold 4-bet threat based on who is left to act? Fourth, does my sizing target the leak, bigger versus callers, standard versus tougher regulars? Fifth, am I avoiding passive, raked lines that turn my hand into a thin, hope-driven call? Key takeaway. Value 3-betting is not about having a strong hand in a vacuum. It is about having an equity edge versus the continue range. 3-bet thinner in position and versus opponents who overcall and do not 4-bet enough. Tighten up out of position versus disciplined regulars. and always account for who is left to act. Your goal is to build bigger pots when worse hands will continue, not to see a flop and hope. Now, let's test your edge. Question 1. What makes a 3-bet a value of 3-bet according to the article? Answer. It's for value when the opponent's calling or 4-betting continue range contains enough worse hands that building the pot immediately gains expected value. Explanation. Value is defined as strength relative to the continue range, not just having a strong hand in a vacuum. Question 2. What are the 2 questions in the article's mental model for deciding if a 3-bet is for value? Answer. The continue test, what they call or 4-bet versus your 3-bet, and the domination test, how often you dominate their continuing hands versus are crushed. Explanation. You first define the continue range, then evaluate how your hand performs against it. Question 3. Why does the article say you can value 3-bet thinner in position than out of position? Answer. In position, you realize equity better post-flop, while out of position, your equity realization drops and you need a more robust edge. Explanation. Being out of position forces more check call and check fold lines, making thin value less reliable. Question 4. What 3-bet sizing baselines does the article recommend in position and out of position? Answer. In position, about 2.2x to 2.7x the open. Out of position, about 3.3x to 4x. Explanation. In position, sizes aim for calls from worse without overinflating. Out of position sizes compensate for positional disadvantage and deny equity. Question 5. In the thin value trap scenario, what opponent tendencies make King-Jack a legitimate value 3-bet? Answer. The button opens wide and calls 3-bets too much, continuing with worse hands like worse Jack-X, medium pairs, pocket 8s through pocket 10s, and broadways like Queen-Jack and Jack-10. Explanation. Those overcalls create a continue range with many worse hands, which is exactly what thin value 3-bets need to get called by worse. Study hard, play smart. That's it for now. I'll see you in the next lesson.